Hello again, friends. I'm Paul Estabrooks, and today on the first Sunday of Advent in the year 2020, I want to tell you part 2 of the story I began last week. In 1988, the Soviet Union celebrated 1,000 years of Christianity, and they had various celebrations, and I joined a human rights group that represented Keston College and Keston College, Canada, where we were from, and had meetings with the authorities in Moscow. And today I want to tell you about our meeting with dissidents. Dissidents were people, many of them Christians, who refused to accept the lies that were told by the totalitarian regime in the area and at the time. And they became known as dissidents. And the first couple we want to share was from our visit to Moscow. Next week, I will tell you about our trip to Ukraine, which was amazing. And because of what happened on this week's story, you understand why the title of next week is called Chased by the KGB. So, we heard that a couple were in Moscow who needed help, a Christian couple. Now, we heard this, interestingly, from the Canadian Embassy personnel, not an official statement from the embassy or in any way connected to the embassy, but there were Christian staff who worked at the Canadian Embassy in Moscow, and they were very concerned about one couple. A couple named Galina and Vasily Berets. And this couple were Pentecostals, and their crime was that they had gone public and tried to request the government to allow 2,800 Pentecostal Christians to emigrate out of the country. This was considered a treason in the Soviet Union, and so they were punished severely for their role in this request. They spent time in prison, both of them, Vasily in a men's prison, Galina in a women's prison. And when they were finally released, they were given their release papers, but they were not given anywhere to reside. You have to have a residence permit in the Soviet Union at that time to either travel or to live somewhere. And so they ended up on the streets. And they ended up in Moscow, appealing still on behalf of Pentecostal Christians who wanted to leave the country. They had nowhere to stay. And if they stayed with Christian friends, of whom they had many, those friends would be punished by the authorities. They would be fined and ostracized in different ways. And so they didn't want to create problems for their friends. And so they literally lived on the streets of Moscow, out of prison now, but nowhere legally to live. And of course they went to the Canadian Embassy and reported their situation. The embassy staff were very concerned about them. We were able to get them into our hotel room through the back door very quietly. Open Doors is used to doing things surreptitiously, and that's what we did with them. And their picture here sitting on a cot in our room. And you can see by the solemn look on their faces that they were very distressed people, under a lot of pressure and not having any opportunity to live a normal life. When I told Galina that we had been praying for them, because their situation had been shared by Keston College and Open Doors News around the world, I told her we'd been praying for them, and she began to cry. And she said, that is the only thing that's kept us going, is the knowledge that people around the world are praying for us. We did take them for a meal, trying to do that surreptitiously, and Vasily showed us his document. And you can't read that, of course, but you can see that it's an official document, and has no indication on the document of any area where they are allowed to live. And so they were appealing to us to represent them. They were able to gain favor with the Canadian Embassy. And when we were at the embassy, they said to us, these people need to get out of the country. They will be allowed out for sure. If we could get 5 families in Canada who would legally sponsor them for 1 year. And we will expedite this if you can do that. And so upon returning to Canada, I talked to the staff at Open Doors Canada, which was a sizable staff at this time in 1988. We had at least 5 of us, and so the 5 of us decided to sponsor Galina and Vasily Barretts to Canada. When all was said and done, Galina was allowed to come, but not Vasily. The authorities claimed that he, being in the military in his earliest years, had state secrets that could not be shared, and therefore he would not be allowed to emigrate. So they let her come to Canada, and not him. She enjoyed her time in Canada. This picture was taken on probably, I think it was her birthday. We had a barbecue in our backyard in our home in Mississauga, and you can see that she's a much happier person once she got to Canada. But then she was very distressed because months and months and months went by and her husband was not released and allowed to come and join her. In fact, within a year, we were on a tour group back to Moscow, and my tour group, you can see one of the young men here, listening to Vasily. We visited Vasily again to find out how he was doing and to encourage him that the day would come when he could be reunited with his bride. That did happen, and today they live in Canada. The second dissident that we met, I mentioned last week, after our morning meeting with the Foreign Affairs Department in Moscow. It was late, like 1:30. We skipped lunch because we had a chance to go visit Alexander Ogorodnikov, and we had to put it in between our 2 meetings that day. And so everybody wanted to do this. This man was so well known because of his stand. And there's a whole video in this series you can see on my YouTube channel, specifically about Alexander and what led to his imprisonment and some of the things that he experienced during his imprisonment. My roommate for this whole venture was Carl Lawrence from the United States. He was my first boss at FEBC Radio in the Philippines, and he also, at this time, was a regular speaker on the Christian radio program, which is called Haven Today, at that time called Haven of Rest. And Carl came along as a journalist, and he was, being my roommate, we did most things together. So we interviewed the Barretts. And then on this afternoon, on Good Friday, our time in 1988, after our meeting with the Foreign Affairs, we went to Alexander Ogorodnikov's office. And Maureen Giroux, our leader, was very excited to meet this man because he stood out head and shoulders in terms of courage above all of the dissidents in the country. And she gave him a big hug, which I think kind of surprised him. Sasha, as his nickname is, Sasha gave us an incredible briefing that day. The interesting thing was that Maureen introduced all 12 of us who were there, many priests from a Catholic background, a Lutheran background, and university professors, and 3 of us who were evangelical. We had all agreed that we would not talk about our organizations or who we represented. We're just a name, and we're from Canada. That was what we were to share. Well, Maureen got excited and a little bit carried away, I think, at that time. And when she got to me, I think I was almost the last one to be introduced. She said, "Now that's Paul Estabrooks, and he's with Open Doors." And then she realized, oh my goodness, I wasn't supposed to say that. But when she said that, Sasha's eyes opened like saucers. And he said, "Open Doors, I've heard a lot about Open Doors. I want to talk to you afterwards. Come and see me." So he gave us his briefing. at that time. The glasnost was only for the West, and that it wasn't going to make any difference. There were still so many people in prison. But of course, within a year or two, all of these people were indeed released. But he was now doing a street ministry. He had a soup kitchen and for people of need, and he was doing communication challenges. He was producing documents to show what was really happening in the country, and especially getting them out to outside the country sources, which created a problem for him because he was therefore constantly under surveillance by the KGB. They just watched him, and because we went to his place, from that point forward, every step we took in the country, we were followed by a KGB agent, which leads to the chasing in next week's story. But Sasha said at the end of the meeting, I would like you, and he pointed to Carl and me. We were roommates traveling together. He said, I'd like you to come to my house for lunch tomorrow. And we had a meeting in the morning with the Barretts, and we had another meeting in the evening. But we said, okay, our afternoon is free. We would love to come. So we went to his home. He had given us the address. And of course, the KGB guys followed us all the way there. And we went in and had a wonderful time with him. He shared about his prison experiences, although, like most prisoners, he didn't really want to talk about them. That's not what most prisoners like to talk about. He was more excited about what his vision was for the days ahead and how God was directing him in ministry there in Moscow at that time. And he was quite excited. Now, I had also brought a bunch of greeting cards from supporters of Open Doors in Canada that were to be given out to people in restricted countries like the Soviet Union. And so this is a picture of my handing these cards to Sasha, who promised to distribute these to other Christians who needed encouragement. And he said, I know so many, I could have used twice as many as you brought. But we were able to do that. And the interesting thing was, while he was in prison, the authorities told his wife, who had a son, they had a son, a very young baby at the time he went to prison, that she would never, ever have a chance to be with her husband. He would not likely come home from prison. And so they almost put pressure on her to divorce him and to marry someone else, which she did. And so the day we were there for lunch, she shows up at the door with her son, who's come to see his dad, who's Alexander Ogorodnikov. Now, Alexander had, after being released, he had met another young lady and he married her. And she was expecting a baby at the time that we were there visiting. So this was the most unusual situation. Here's his former wife, who has no antagonistic feelings toward him at all. In fact, if anything, I sense regret that she had listened to the KGB instead of just holding out in hope. But she brings her son, who is Alexander's son, to spend time with his dad. Well, we're there. It was difficult for him because he's now guesting two of us, and he didn't want us to leave. We said, we'll leave. No, I want you to meet my son. And so he introduced us to his first son. And it was interesting to watch the two girls. One was his former wife, one was his current wife. But they were very friendly with each other, and they were having a really good time of fellowship while we were talking with the son. Well, later we had personal time with Alexander. And Carl, who is now passed away and with the Lord, the only video that I can find of Carl Lawrence was an interview that he did some years ago. And this meeting with Alexander is one of the things he talked about. And I'd like you to hear his account of what was shared and what we learned.
In Manila, Philippines, as program director, part of the programming was Russian. So we had two Russian preachers there. And they didn't want to record. They wanted to do it live. which was 10 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning. And their wives would bring them borscht and they would eat, but they'd preach just right out of the Bible for 3 hours, 4 hours. And it was like China. They knew more about Marxism and stuff than we ever will. All they wanted to hear was the gospel, the word of God. And so the man of great faith that I was, I would see this, and I like to get up early in the morning or even late at night, and I would walk around this beautiful Manila night, beautifully warm. And I would say, oh, Lord, is anybody listening? Here are these people that sit there every night. They study all day. Is anybody listening? Okay, so I was invited when President Reagan was going to Russia. A human rights group who wanted to make some inroads and be there at the right time from Canada wanted an American journalist. I'm a journalist. I'm not a preacher. And they wanted a journalist to go, so they asked me if I'd go with them. And being the only journalist, I got to interview some of the dissidents that would talk to President Reagan. And one was this guy named Alexander Ogorodnikov. Now, Alexander Ogorodnikov he was saved while in college. And I said to him, what was it like in prison? He went on told about, the terrible things that happened, but he said they made one mistake. They took my Bible away. And I said, I will not eat until you give me my Bible. Now, here's the power of God's word. You see, they could have killed him, buried him, you never would have heard of him. But they were afraid of him because of his belief in the Bible. And so I said, what was it like? Or something to that effect, some brilliant question, I'm sure. And he said, at first they took tubes without any lubrication and shoved them down inside me. They took a soccer ball, cut it open, filled it with boiling sugar water, which is nutritious, seal it up, and then stomp on it so this hot water would go down. And he says, after a couple of weeks, he said it was so burned it didn't matter. There was no fun anymore. I wouldn't yell or anything. Now, all he'd had to do was say, keep the Bible, but he wouldn't do it. So he said then they just took needles and stuck them in, and they force-fed him for that way. And he reached across the table, and his fingers were all paralyzed. He says he started out I think it was with days. First weeks. His old brother, sometimes the weeks were so long. He wept. Then he said, oh, brother, sometimes the days were so long. He wept. Sometimes the hours were so long. And he wept. And he holding on to me he said, some days, the seconds were so long. And then he lit up and reached over, and there was his Bible, same Bible. And he said, but they gave me my Bible back. Now, how long? I thought, okay, that's a month. No, he did that for 659 days. Laying there being force-fed for 659 days. Okay, I'm talking to this same guy now, and there was KGB right outside the door. And I said, well, how did you survive in this prison after they gave you your Bible back? And he said, now, he didn't know I'd ever been to Manila or was a missionary or anything. So
he assumed you were a Canadian journalist.
Canadian journalist, that's all. And he says, well, it was wonderful. He said, we would, first of all, we bribed the guards to bring us on the radio a piece at a time, and we put it together. But we didn't have any earphones. So we would take turns at night. The believers would take turns at night, and everybody would give them their blanket, and we would be without a blanket. And they would go out behind or outside. This is in Siberia, where the guards didn't go. And this is what he said to me. He says, we listened to the gospel of Jesus Christ from Manila, Philippines. Now, here I am, a man of great faith with 10 different versions of the Bible, walking in a compound saying, oh God, is anybody listening? And here are prisoners in Siberia with blankets over their heads, listening to that same preacher that I was listening to.
After Carl had left FEBC Manila and gone back to the United States, I was appointed as the overseas broadcast manager for the Philippines, and those two Russian broadcasters, including a third family that came to join them in Russian, were part of my team, and I was their supervisor, and so I had the joy of being able to share with them this story that Carl just shared with us now, about how even in the Gulag, there were opportunities for some people to hear their programming and to be encouraged by the message from the scriptures. Later, Alexander came to Canada. When the Soviet Union collapsed at the end of 1991, then travel was permitted to those who had been classified as dissidents. And Alexander came to Toronto to a very big meeting. I'll probably talk about it in a future video. But I had a wonderful opportunity to host him in Canada, and then through contacts that I had, get him a visa to the United States, to Washington, because there were people in government there who knew about him and really wanted him to come and share with them in Washington, D.C. But we had a great time, and this is what Sasha looked like at that time. Then later years, he was able to speak for Open Doors, especially this picture is taken in Holland, where he shared at an Open Doors Day in Holland about how he had been encouraged by what he learned that Open Doors was doing while he was in prison years, especially. Then, much later, it actually happened to be my 65th birthday. I was in Moscow on the day that I turned 65, the notable senior transition year. And I was traveling with Dr. Ron Boyd McMillan, and we were to interview Alexander Ogorodnikov on the topic of prayer that you learned about if you watched last week's video that occurred while he was in prison. And we went to Sasha's home, and we had lunch again with him. It was a special time, and this is what he looked like at this point. But by now, his humanitarian ministry had just expanded in significant ways throughout the city. He had homes for unwed mothers, for street women, as well as those in poverty and in need in the city as well. So Alexander Ogorodnikov became a good friend of mine. I really respect this man. Let me close our discussions about Sasha with a current book that I am reading, and it's Live Not by Lies. This is written by Rod Dreher. It's a brand new book. I'm just about finished, but another 50 pages, and it is really excellent. The subtitle of the book is A Manual for Christian Dissidents, and what he outlines in this book is the fact that the Soviet Union was ruled by a very harsh totalitarianism, and today, Rod Dreher is seeing a soft totalitarianism rising around the world, even in North America potentially. And so he went and interviewed all of these Christians who lived through the roughest years of the Soviet Union era in Eastern Europe as well as in Russia, and learned from them how they survived and what they did to survive. And he documents it here in this really excellent book, A Manual for Christian Dissidents. And in the book he has pages on Alexander Ogorodnikov. And the one that blessed me the most was a story that Sasha remembers from his very earliest years when he ran something that was called the Christian Seminar for young people, university-age young people, which of course you can imagine the KGB were just really ticked that this was going on right under their eyes or under their nose, yet they weren't able to stop it. And one day at one of their Bible studies, a man came into the room who they didn't know, but they realized that he had been a dissident, had spent a lot of time in prison, and he listened to these young people, and he said, "Oh, young people, if there had only been 10, just 10, of young people like you in St. Petersburg in 1917, there would not have been the revolution that occurred."